And so we present the 20 greatest moments in a century of greatness. Many doubted that Notre Dame deserved to be playing in the Sugar Bowl on the first day of January 1992. Having lost 2 of the last 3 regular season games, Notre Dame was a decided underdog against third-ranked Florida. The Gators' passing attack was precise and powerful. Florida scored the first 13 points of the game and was primed for the rout. In the third quarter, however, Notre Dame decided the road to glory was on the ground. Coach Lou Holtz called for 11 straight running plays into the heart of the Gator defense. Running backs Rodney Culver, Jerome Bettis, and Tony Brooks pounded the ball down the field, while the Irish defense often dropped 8 men into pass coverage. Notre Dame racked up 245 second-half rushing yards, and Jerome Bettis scored 3 touchdowns in the final quarter, as the Irish refused to be Gator bait, winning the 1992 Sugar Bowl 39-28. A most unlikely candidate for hero became a Notre Dame legend on the afternoon of September 20th, 1980. The week before, in the win over Purdue, the regular Irish kicker Steve Sitchie had broken a bone in his neck while making a tackle on a kickoff. This left the job to Harry Oliver, a slightly built left-footed soccer-style kicker from Cincinnati. For nearly 60 minutes, the Irish and Wolverines of Michigan went back and forth in a battle that was symbolic of the great tradition of both schools. On the sidelines were 2 Hall of Fame coaches, Dan Devine and Bo Schembechler. As the game wound down, it seemed as if Schembechler would walk off the field the victor, as Michigan led by 1 with only 40 seconds left. Sensing defeat, Devine gambled and put freshman quarterback Blair Keel into the lineup. Keel promptly took the Irish to the Michigan 34-yard line. With just seconds to play, Notre Dame sent in the field goal team for an unlikely 51-yard attempt. Kneeling at the Michigan 41, Tim Cagle calmly caught the snap from Bill Seaweed. Oliver swiftly snapped his left leg into a downward arc. 51 yards away, the ball floated down perfectly for the winning field goal, as Notre Dame beat Michigan 29-27 in one of the most spectacular finishes ever played at Notre Dame Stadium. The era was over. The 11 years of renewal, excitement, and success of Era Parseghian at Notre Dame would end on the artificial turf of the Orange Bowl against Alabama on January 1st, 1975. Alabama was unbeaten after the 1974 season and was ranked number 1. Could Notre Dame rally one more time for Era? The game began with Notre Dame jumping to a 13-0 lead. Alabama responded with a field goal, and the half ended with the Irish leading 13-3. After a scoreless third quarter, the teams battled back and forth, with the Irish holding to the 10-point lead. With under 4 minutes to play, Bama scored on a long pass and then added the 2-point conversion to make it 13-11. Alabama regained possession with less than 2 minutes to play, and needing only a field goal to win, the Tide rolled downfield. But Notre Dame's Reggie Barnett intercepted a Richard Todd pass, and the Irish killed the clock to cement the 2-point win. The victory allowed Era Parseghian to leave the field as he deserved to, a winner. One huge mountain was left to climb for the 1988 Irish in order to earn the national championship, and the mountain was the West Virginia Mountaineers. On a cool and cloudy day at the Fiesta Bowl, the Irish defense pounded West Virginia quarterback Major Harris early and often. Notre Dame raced to a 23-6 lead at the half, sparked by quarterback Tony Rice and running backs Rodney Culver and Anthony Johnson. Freshman wide receiver Rocket Ismail went 29 yards for a score, but it wasn't until a great defensive stand in the third quarter that Notre Dame cemented the victory. Led by All-America Frank Stamms, the Irish defense put the Mountaineers' offense into reverse, and Notre Dame took complete control of the game. Rice threw his second scoring pass of the day to Frank Jacobs, and Notre Dame celebrated its 11th national championship with a 34-21 win in the Valley of the Sun to complete a perfect season. The Irish took a quantum leap toward the national title with a 30-point win over USC. But there were still a lot of skeptics who didn't think the Irish could beat undefeated Texas and Heisman Trophy winner Earl Campbell in the Cotton Bowl. It was a chilly and sunny day in Dallas on the second day of 1978, as the Irish silenced the doubters and roped the Longhorns in the first half. The Irish defense throttled Campbell from the opening snap, while Irish quarterback Joe Montana pushed Notre Dame to a 24-10 halftime lead. The second half was just like the first, as the Irish took Texas to the woodshed and finished with a 38-10 shellacking of the Longhorns. Dan Devine and his team had come all the way back from near disaster to claim the national title. The war had been won, and those who saved the world for democracy had returned to the United States for mundane matters like playing football. In 1944 and 1945, Army had smashed the Irish by a combined score of 107-0. Now Irish head coach Frank Leahy's players had returned from the service to face the cadets of Army at Yankee Stadium on November 9, 1946. Future Hall of Fame players dotted both rosters, but conservative play by both coaches and spirited defensive play contributed to the outcome. Notre Dame pushed to the Army 4-yard line in the second quarter, but the cadets held the line and the Irish came away empty-handed. Throughout the day, the Army Heisman Trophy winners, Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis, had been contained by the Irish defense. But late in the game, Blanchard broke free around the left side and headed for a score. Somehow, Notre Dame's Johnny Lujack made a perfect open field tackle on the All-America back, and the game ended in a scoreless tie. Notre Dame was later named the national champion, but the 1946 Irish team will forever be remembered for that epic battle against Army on that overcast day in November of 1946. Notre Dame did not invent the forward pass, but there is no doubt that the combination of quarterback Gus Duray and Newt Rockne did more to popularize the pass than any other duo in college football history. Until the first day of November 1913, Duray and Rockne had worked as lifeguards on the beach at Cedar Point, Ohio. In their spare time, they worked on perfecting the pass patterns the pair had developed. There is no doubt that the use of the pass in the first half of the 1913 game at West Point shocked the Army cadets, including an injured end named Dwight Eisenhower, who watched the game on the sidelines. After 2 quarters, Notre Dame was ahead 14-13. Army would not score another point, as DeRay picked apart the Army defense with an aerial barrage. Rockne caught a pass for 40 yards, almost unheard of at that time. The final was 35-13 as DeRay completed 14 of 17 passes for 243 yards. With the shocking victory, Notre Dame was no longer just a small Catholic boys' school from South Bend, Indiana. And the forward pass was no longer a footnote in offensive playbooks. The series between Notre Dame and Penn State was ending due to the Nittany Lions' decision to join the Big Ten Conference. The final game would be played at Notre Dame Stadium on November 14, 1992. In a classic battle of heavyweights, the teams would slug it out for 4 quarters. A blocked extra point for the Irish early in the game proved huge. Still, the Nittany Lions led by 7 points with precious little time left on the clock. Realizing they had one last chance at a score, Irish quarterback Rick Mirer slowly and steadily led his team toward the end zone. With 20 seconds left and facing 4th down, Mirer flipped the ball to fullback Jerome Bettis. On the following 2-point conversion, wide receiver Lake Dawson flashed open for a split second, but Mirer looked elsewhere. Nearly sacked, Mirer fired the ball toward the corner of the end zone. Out of nowhere, running back Reggie Brooks extended through the air and clutched the ball to his chest, as Rick Mirer's final points in Notre Dame Stadium were 8 points that made the big difference. The place of Tim Brown in the history of Notre Dame football cannot be underestimated. He was the player at the vanguard of the Irish resurgence under Lou Holtz, and in 1987 made headlines by winning the Heisman Trophy. Football fans had first heard of Brown when he helped Notre Dame stage an unlikely rally to defeat USC in the final game of 1986. In 1987, he picked up where he left off, making an acrobatic catch for a touchdown in the opening game upset of Michigan. Then against the Spartans of Michigan State, Tim Brown thrust himself into the forefront of the Heisman Trophy race. Brown returned not 1, but 2 punts for touchdowns against the Spartans, with a dazzling display of speed and agility. Brown continued to excite crowds whenever he touched the ball, whether as a receiver, running back, or kick returner. And at the end of the 1987 season, Brown was named the 7th Notre Dame player to have won the Heisman Trophy. No team dominated college football the way the Oklahoma Sooners did in the 1950s. On November 16, 1957, the defending national champions were heavy favorites to send Notre Dame back to South Bend with another Sooner smashing. Oklahoma's 47-game winning streak was the longest in the history of college football. The Irish had endured a losing season in 1956, and Coach Terry Brennan was under fire. Oklahoma was favored by 3 touchdowns but never scored a point. The Irish defense allowed only 1 serious drive by the Sooners' offense, and the game moved deep into the 4th quarter with neither team having scored. With less than 4 minutes left, the Irish had moved to the Sooners' 3-yard line. On 4th and goal, quarterback Bob Williams pitched the ball to halfback Dick Lynch, who raced around the right side and into the end zone. The final, 7-0 Irish, as Notre Dame notched another improbable win. There are many Irish fans who maintain that the 1973 Sugar Bowl game against Alabama was the most exciting game in the history of Notre Dame football. Both the Irish and Crimson Tide were unbeaten, and both teams' rosters were sprinkled with All-Americas and future NFL stars. After each had scored a touchdown, Notre Dame's Al Hunter, a freshman, returned to kick off 93 yards for a score. The touchdown gave the Irish a 7-point lead that they would take into halftime. The third and fourth quarters were exercises in tension and swings of momentum. Bear Bryant's team led by 2 points when the Irish put together a 79-yard drive that stalled at the Bama 15-yard line. With the game on the line, kicker Bob Thomas wiggled through a field goal to give the Irish the lead at 24-23. Although Alabama was unable to answer the score, they moved the ball and pinned the Irish at their own 1-yard line with 3 minutes to play. On third down, Irish head coach Ara Parseghian decided to gamble and called for a pass. Quarterback Tom Clements rewarded Parseghian's gamble by finding reserve tight end Robin sideline. Weber went out of bounds at the feet of Bama coach Bear Bryant, who saw his chance for a national title stomped out by the Irish. Meanwhile, Ara Parseghian and the Notre Dame football team would celebrate Ara's second national championship, following the 24-23 win. Much like the 1946 Army game, the battle with Michigan State in 1966 was supposed to have decided which team was the best in the nation. At the end of the 60 minutes, nothing was decided. Michigan State jumped out to a 10-0 lead before the Irish rallied. As the game wore on at Spartan Stadium, the Irish ranks gradually dwindled. Starting quarterback Terry Hanratty hurt his shoulder. Backup quarterback Coley O'Brien found reserve running back Bob Gladio for a 34-yard scoring pass. And Joe Azzaro hit on a 28-yard field goal on the first play of the fourth quarter. The Irish coach had seen his team rally to tie the game and correctly decided on the last Irish possession to run out the clock. Parseghian defended his decision, and the pollsters agreed, rewarding the Irish the 1966 national championship. Notre Dame's victory over Army in 1924 is remembered not so much for what happened on the field, but how the game was described by the legendary sports writer Grantland Rice. In his first year as head coach, Knute Rockne had started 4 sophomores in the offensive backfield. Harry Stuhldreher played quarterback. Don Miller was the right halfback. Jim Crowley the left halfback. And Elmer Layden played fullback. All were quick off the snap and possessed outstanding speed and moves in the open field. The nation knew Rockne had a great team in 1924, but the Army game in New York City, played in front of over 55,000 fans at the Polo Grounds, catapulted the team into football immortality. For the record, Notre Dame won 13-7 over the Cadets, but it wasn't until Sunday morning that the full force of the game was felt. The New York Herald-Tribune had assigned Rice to cover the game, and as he sat in the press box, he wrote what has become the most famous passage in sports journalism. Outlined against a blue-gray October sky, the 4 horsemen rode again. In dramatic lore, they are known as famine, pestilence, destruction, and death. These are only aliases. Their real names are Stuhldreher, Miller, Crowley, and Layton. Credit must also be given to Rockne's publicity aide, George Strickler. Strickler posed the players in full uniform atop 4 horses. The wire services picked up the now famous photo, and the legendary status of Stuhldreher, Miller, Crowley, and Layton was assured. All 4 players were eventually elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, and Notre Dame won the national championship, completing an unbeaten season which included a win over Stanford in the Rose Bowl. After the 1988 season, Notre Dame stood alone as the top college football program in the nation. The Irish had captured the school's 11th national championship and had many of the players returning who had played major roles in the unbeaten year of 1988. The Irish looked for its 3rd straight win over the Wolverines as more than 100,000 jammed Michigan Stadium on September 16th. Notre Dame was ranked number 1, while Michigan stood at number 2. The artificial turf was soaked, and both coaches knew a conservative approach was the best battle plan for the afternoon. Irish quarterback Tony Rice utilized his running game to take the ball down the field in the first quarter. As Notre Dame reached the red zone, Rice completed his only pass of the afternoon as he found fullback Anthony Johnson over the middle for a touchdown. Michigan would answer that score, but the extra point hit the upright, and the teams went to the locker room to dry out, with the Irish leading 7-6. The second half began with Michigan kicking off to Notre Dame. Irish sophomore speedster Ragib Rocket Ismail settled under the ball at the Notre Dame 11 and ignited. Despite the wet turf, the Rocket exploded through the coverage team for an 89-yard touchdown. Craig Hentrick added a 30-yard field goal, and Notre Dame led 17-6 after 3 quarters. Michigan answered with a 5-yard scoring pass from quarterback Elvis Gerbach. But on the ensuing kickoff, the Wolverines again made the mistake of letting the ball go to Ismail. Taking the ball on his own 8-yard line, Ismail again sprinted through a gaping hole for another kickoff return for a score. Notre Dame went on to win the game 24-19. The Rockets' effort was only the second time in NCAA history that a player had returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns in the same game. The first time, Rocket Ismail in 1988 versus Rice. The 1935 edition of the Fightin' Irish will be remembered for one of the greatest comebacks in the history of the game. After a 6-3 record in his first year as head coach, Elmer Layton, the fullback of the famed Four Horsemen backfield, had the Irish rolling with a 5-0 record as the team prepared to face mighty Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio. The city of Columbus was engulfed in a carnival-like atmosphere in anticipation of the game, as a crowd of over 81,000 was expected to jam Ohio Stadium on the afternoon of November 2nd, 1935. The Buckeyes were rated number 1 and had yet to be tested. The Buckeyes moved the ball with ease, and the Ohio State defense thwarted any attempt at offense by the Irish. After 2 quarters, Ohio State had dominated every phase of the game and led 13-0. Trying to change their luck, Layton used the tactic of his former coach Newt Rockne and announced in the locker room that the second team would start the 3rd quarter for Notre Dame. The change of pace seemed to give the Irish a lift, as the offense began to move for Layden's team behind the talented Andy Pilney. A pass from Pilney to Francis Gall put the ball on the Ohio State 2-yard line. And on the next play, Steve Miller plunged over for the score. After a missed extra point, the score stood at 13-6. The Notre Dame defense again held, and momentum started to swing to the Irish again. With just 3 minutes to go, Pilney completed a 33-yard scoring pass to Mike Layden, the brother of the Irish head coach. But again, the conversion was missed, and the Irish still trailed by a single point, 13-12. Everyone in the stadium knew the Irish would try an onside kick, and the Buckeyes were up for the task, recovering the kick to seemingly ice the game. All Ohio State had to do was hold onto the ball and time would expire. However, in what has become a trademark of Notre Dame football, fate and faith intervened for the Irish. Buckeye running back Dick Bells ran off tackle and was smashed by Pilney and fumbled. Notre Dame recovered and had one last chance for the upset. With the crowd screaming, Pilney retreated to throw but saw no open receivers. So he took off into the jaws of the Buckeye defense. He avoided tacklers until he was deep into Ohio State territory and was forced out of bounds at the 19-yard line. Unfortunately for Pilney, he suffered a knee injury on the play and had to leave the game. Enter Bill Shakespeare, who was hoping to write his own ending to a tempestuous day. With 30 seconds remaining, his first pass went directly into the hands of Ohio State's Dick Bells. Again, fate intervened, as Bells, the same player who fumbled moments earlier, dropped the sure interception. Now Layden scanned the sidelines to send in another play. It was a pass play that Shakespeare executed perfectly, lofting the ball into the end zone and into the welcome arms of Wayne Milner. Notre Dame had scored 3 touchdowns in the second half to stun the sellout Columbus crowd and the Buckeyes 18-13. The men of Troy had beaten the Irish 3 straight years, but the Trojans were not prepared for the unexpected ruse that the Irish would offer them. In the summer of 1977, Devine went to then equipment manager Gene O'Neill and ordered a set of Kelly green jerseys. On a beautiful October day, Devine sprung one of the most cleverly concealed traps in college football history. After warming up in the usual navy blue, the Irish found the green jerseys with a gold trim hanging in their lockers. The result was nothing short of pandemonium. USC had no chance. Ted Bergmeyer, a former Notre Dame quarterback and receiver turned defensive back, played spectacularly. On 2 separate kicking attempts, Bergmeyer reverted to his quarterback days, making big plays. He threw, he ran, he even made a tremendous interception. Notre Dame exploded in the second quarter to take over the game, as quarterback Joe Montana found receivers with ease, and the Irish defense dominated the Trojan running game at every turn. Very few games ever played in the long and fabled series have been as one-sided as the 1977 battle between the Irish and Trojans. The final score was 49-19. The media wanted Devine to talk about the green jerseys, but the coach preferred to talk about the players who wore those jerseys. And for the remainder of his career at Notre Dame, the Irish would be wearing the green every time they came onto the field at Notre Dame Stadium. There is no other game in Notre Dame football history so enveloped in mystery and fable than the 1928 contest against Army at Yankee Stadium in New York City. Nearly 8 years earlier, the greatest player to ever play for head coach Notre died of a strep infection. On his deathbed, did George Gipp really ask his coach to go out and win one for the Gipper? The truth will never really be known. What is known is that the 1928 team, decimated by injuries and inexperience, again rose to the occasion against a heavily favored team from West Point. Critics clamored that Rockne had lost the magic touch. Notre Dame was only 4-2, a very un-Rockne-like record. Meanwhile, Army was unbeaten, having won 6 straight. Rockne knew the difficult challenge facing his team, and after the pregame warm-ups, he gathered them in the dressing room. The Notre Dame coach waited until the room was silent and then addressed his players. Notre Dame played as if they were possessed. Maybe they were. Army led 6-0, but Jack Chavigny scored on a plunge to tie the contest. On the last series of the game, Chavigny was injured. As a result, Rockne had to shuffle his lineup and called upon a slightly built reserve named Johnny O'Brien to play left end. With the ball on the Army 32, halfback Butch Nimick lofted a wobbly pass in the direction of O'Brien. The catch was made at the 10, and O'Brien squeezed into the end zone for the winning score. Notre Dame had truly won one for the Gipper. The showdown between Florida State and the Irish in November 1993 was one matchup that fulfilled the hype and anticipation unlike any other. Coach Bobby Bowden's Seminoles were ranked number 1 in the nation and well on the way to establishing the Florida State program as the most successful program in the college game for the decade of the 90s. Lou Holtz's Irish had improved each and every week during the season, and after being ranked 11th in the first week of the season, Notre Dame had moved steadily up the polls to number 2. Florida State was loaded with talent, led by eventual Heisman Trophy winner Charlie Ward. The Noles showcased that talent early, as Florida State scored the first time it had the ball, but that only seemed to awaken the echoes at Notre Dame Stadium. The Irish responded with an 80-yard drive that ended on a reverse for a touchdown as Adrian Jarrell scored. Meanwhile, the Irish defense harassed Ward during much of the first half. Notre Dame made it 21-7 at halftime following scoring runs by Lee Becton for 26 yards and a 5-yard scamper by All-America Jeff Burris. In the third quarter, the Irish expanded the lead to 24-7 following a 47-yard field goal blast by Kevin Pendergast. Notre Dame's defense continued to play well, but several times during the game, Irish defenders seemingly had an interception in hand, only to drop the ball, giving Florida State new life. Ward got the Noles back in the game, leading his team 80 yards with a touchdown scored by running back Warwick Dunn. Florida State then added a field goal to narrow the gap to 24-17. Now it was Irish quarterback Kevin McDougall's turn. McDougall had responded to challenges all year long and answered Florida State's challenge by engineering a scoring drive to put the Irish up 31-17. The drive ended when Jeff Burris found the end zone for the second time on the day. With less than 2 minutes remaining, Ward on 4th and goal from the Irish 20 fired a desperation pass that went through the hands of Irish safety Brian McGee and right into the hands of Florida State wide receiver Kes McCorvey to cut the Irish lead to 7. Notre Dame was forced to punt, and the Irish defense faced Ward with the ball on the Florida State 37 with 51 seconds to play and no timeouts. The future NBA guard furiously moved his team to the Irish 14-yard line. Freshman Thomas Knight knocked down a pass as the clock shrunk to 3 seconds. One play remained. Ward went back to pass and was immediately pressured by the Irish defense. Ward rolled to his left and fired for the end zone and receiver Kevin Knox. Notre Dame's Sean Wooden batted the pass to the ground and bedlam engulfed Notre Dame Stadium. In one of the most exciting 60 minutes ever played in the house that Rockne built, Notre Dame showed the nation that the spirit and tradition of the Fightin' Irish was far from a passing fad. Bowl games are supposed to be rewards for good seasons and planned to be played in at least moderate weather. The conditions were anything but moderate on January 1st, 1979. An overnight ice storm left Big D looking more like a scene out of Dr. Zhivago, with power lines drooping and cars skidding right and left all over the city. In his final game for Notre Dame, quarterback Joe Montana wasted little time in gaining the lead for the Irish. After linebacker Bob Crable recovered a Houston fumble on the Cougars' 25-yard line, Montana again led the team into the end zone, as fullback Pete Buchanan scored from 1 yard. After both touchdowns, the conversions were missed. Despite the quick start for the Irish, Houston responded by scoring the next 34 points. Notre Dame had suddenly gone from a team in control to a team without a clue. There was more bad news. Joe Montana did not go back onto the field for the start of the second half. He remained in the locker room suffering from hypothermia. Shrouded in a blanket, shivering almost uncontrollably, Montana tried to sip chicken soup in an effort to warm his body. Back out on the field, Houston's 20-12 lead at halftime expanded. The partisan crowd screamed long and hard for their Cougars. Montana heard the sound and knew he was needed. He gulped what was left of the soup and returned to the field. The third quarter ended with Houston leading 34-12. Only 7:35 showed on the clock as Houston tried to punt from its own 33. Reserve linebacker Tony Belden burst through the line and made a clean block of Jay Wyatt's punt. Belden's roommate Steve Sitchie picked up the ball and ran it in for the score. Montana found running back Vegas Ferguson for the two-point conversion to make the score 34-20. The Notre Dame defense quickly forced another Cougar punt, and Montana drove the offense down the field. Just over 4 minutes were left in the game when Montana scrambled in for the touchdown from the 2-yard line. The Irish again went for two. Notre Dame had scored 16 straight points. Houston had the ball, the lead, and was in control of the clock as the minutes were reduced to seconds. Cougars coach Bill Yeomans changed his mind when Notre Dame was flagged for offsides on a 4th down play. Yeomans went for the kill on 4th and 1. The ball went back to Notre Dame on the Houston 29. 28 seconds were left. No timeouts. Montana ran out of the pocket and picked up 11 yards. He then found Hayes on the sideline for 10 more. There was time for only one play. Notre Dame had scored 22 consecutive points in just over 7.5 minutes. One of the greatest comebacks in the history of college football had seen the Irish fall behind 34-12 and then rally to win 35-34. The final game for Joe Montana as the Notre Dame quarterback would forever mark his career as the comeback kid. On October 15, 1988, the Hurricanes and Irish would play a game that to this day remains probably the most exciting 60 total minutes of football ever played at Notre Dame Stadium. The Irish were ranked 4th, and Miami was number 1. On Notre Dame's first possession, Irish quarterback Tony Rice immediately went to work. It took Notre Dame 12 plays to move 75 yards for the game's first score. Miami quarterback Steve Walsh led his team to the tying score to begin the second quarter. Rice dropped a bomb on the Canes with a 57-yard strike to Raghib Ismail. With his team 9 yards away from the score, Rice let the Miami rush in, then flipped the ball to fullback Braxton Banks. Less than 2 minutes later, All-America defensive end Frank Stamms deflected a Walsh pass near midfield. 60 yards later, Terrell stood in the end zone and the Irish led 21-7. Miami needed less than 5 minutes to equalize the score. The first 30 minutes had decided little, as the game was tied at 21. Notre Dame had the ball close to midfield and took only 2 plays to retake the lead. On 4th and 6 from the Irish 11, Walsh feathered the ball toward Andre Brown in the south end zone. Jimmy Johnson never hesitated in going for the 2-point conversion and the win. Pat Terrell was in perfect position. Had it really happened? Had Miami finally been beaten? All one needed to see to answer that question was to gaze on the hallowed turf of the house that Rockne built, to realize that they were witnessing the moment in a century of greatness.